a lot of us want to get there, the quick way. But in reality, you gotta put in the work, and you gotta build a team around yourself. And
hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Commercial Real Estate Secrets, where I'm your host, Austin Hare. And Dr. Peter Kelley is our guest today. He's the CEO and co-founder of Operation Dental. They started in 2016, and they've already got 10 locations. They also have a plan to grow much more rapidly in the coming years. And so, Peter, really excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Austin.
So, you and I have known each other for a long time now, actually. And ironically, you know some of my buddies that I grew up wakeboarding with. I guess I wakeboarded with them. You kind of grew up with them. And so it's always interesting when our paths intersect. And so, I'm just curious, how did you get into dental? Like, where did you grow up? Like, what was that like for you when you were kind of figuring your life out?
Yeah, so I come from a family of dentists. I got 7 dentists in my family. My grandfather, my 2 uncles, my sister, my cousin, and my other cousin is in dental school. So he's almost a dentist. But dentistry was always a strong influence on my life, even since a young child, just hanging out with my uncles and my grandfather. I actually wanted to be a dentist before I wanted to be a firefighter, professional baseball player, the typical jobs that, little boys want to have. But, it's a heavy influence, in my life. And, I grew up in, Pensacola, Florida. My father is actually an emergency room physician, and, just kind of growing up, watching, how hard he had to work, 12, 24-hour shifts in the hospital. He was a big advocate for myself and my sister to go to dental school if we were going to get into healthcare. So that's what we ended up doing. And, it was, I think it was a good decision. I can't imagine working in a hospital at all. So,
yeah. And so you grew up in Southern Florida or Iowa? Or you started in Iowa and you ended up in Florida?
No, I grew up mostly in Pensacola, Florida. It's a small town in the Panhandle, on your way to New Orleans, essentially. So beautiful beaches. I grew up, learning how to surf there, being, close to the beach. You get all those types of amenities. Definitely a beautiful place in the state that's worth checking out. But I ended up deciding to work and eventually buy a practice in the Central Florida area. And that's kind of where my career started.
Yeah, that's cool. Obviously, we're in Orlando, so it makes things easier for us. We could have done this in person, actually. We would have waited a little bit. But, what was it about Orlando that drew you there? Did you do a lot of research and kind of land on that? Because one thing about Orlando, if you like surfing, there's not a whole lot of surfing in Orlando.
Yeah. I used to try to go surfing after work, and it was like an hour and 15-minute drive. And I was able to do it until they started doing heavy construction on I-4. Then that trip just kept getting longer and longer and longer. My idea with moving to Orlando originally, it's pretty simple. They had a better airport, which meant that I could travel more easily to places all over the world. I had my eye on Puerto Rico. Yeah, I had my eye on Puerto Rico as just like a place that I could go and go surfing on a regular basis. My first practice was actually called Rincon Dental Arts. That's how dedicated I was to this vision. It was kind of I was a young single guy that was my priorities at the time, was just, I want to have a good work-life balance and do the things that I enjoy.
No, yeah, and that's super cool. So, Leo, I want to talk a little bit about the process, the transition that you had. We're talking a little bit earlier offline, but essentially, so you started this practice. It's going well, And then, what is that like when you decided that you wanted to start a DSO? And then technically there's a lot of definitions for DSO, right? Like you could say you don't really have one until you file your paperwork, but you can make the argument that as soon as you hire an associate doctor, you have a DSO, right? And so it sounded like your first practice was going well enough that you wanted to start your second practice, right?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Buying my first practice in 2013, it was a smaller practice that needed a lot of revamping. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 27 years old at the time, and I made all sorts of mistakes. And it was actually a really difficult experience for me. Weren't the happiest years of my life, to say the least. And I didn't end up going to Puerto Rico all the time because I couldn't afford it, and I was busy running this practice. So, I had this illusion that I could buy a business and, do all these great things. But the reality was I bought the business and the business owned me. Took about 3 or 4 years to really put that practice on the map. And I put my blood, sweat, and tears into getting it to a point where it was finally actually making money. And at that time, I was actually looking for another dentist to partner with, because I really, the goal was, eventually work part-time as a dentist and have just freedom to do the things that I enjoy. But I never found a dentist. Instead, I found an individual who had an MBA degree. And we met, kind of randomly. It wasn't planned. But we ended up meeting and deciding to work with each other, and that was in 2016. And, it was almost like a yin-yang type of relationship. He was strong at a lot of things that I had no clue on, and obviously I was a dentist and I had experience running and managing a dental office, so it was a really good partnership.
Yeah,
and
so
after...
And I like what you said about, you wanted to own a business, but the business owned you. I think that happens so many times with entrepreneurs is, I think we all have this craving for freedom, like above everything else. Like we think, okay, if we own a business, then we'll have time freedom, we'll have financial freedom, we'll have geographic freedom. But a lot of times we end up trading the 40-hour work week for an 80-hour work week. And so what was that, when you say that it owned you, that means you're obviously constricted to that one individual location. Now you have 10. So something shifted along the way. What were some of the things that you learned that allowed you to grow and expand?
Well, that commitment that I invested in the beginning that had a lot of pain points to it was my ultimate ticket to freedom. So commitment leads to freedom. So you're not going to get to this place where you have more time for yourself and you're making good money, and maybe some of that money is investment income. You're not going to get there by just bouncing from one opportunity to another. So you need to sink your teeth into something, give it all you can, and it might be a painful experience for a while. But if you do the right things and you surround yourself with the right people and you read the right books, and you have a little bit of luck involved, you can ultimately find yourself in a new situation. I'm 35 years old, Austin, we're probably a similar age. People of our age group, we're a little bit spoiled compared to the previous generation. The previous generations, that was the ultimate dream, is to own a business and work in that business 40 hours a week for the next 30, 40 years, especially in dentistry. We've heard that story over and over again. There's this new wave of desire to have more freedom because, we can see all the places that we could go on the internet. And I think that creates this, it's almost like this suffering that our generation has over FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And a lot of us want to get there, the quick way. But in reality, you got to put in the work, and you got to build a team around yourself, and whether that's a single dental office or you're trying to grow a group. I mean, the principles are congruent all the way through. And I think, listening to podcasts like this and surrounding yourself with people who who are where you want to go is ultimately what I think will help people.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned several things in that I want to kind of bring out. So I think, first of all, we live in a kind of a spoiled generation because we see, the Bitcoin millionaires and the TikTok millionaires, and like everybody just seems like they're multimillionaires. They don't ever have to work. And so I think that it does create a lot of FOMO, and it creates an apathy towards like work ethic. But the flip side of that is that it also creates opportunity for people like, yourself and myself and my colleagues who are willing to put in the time and the effort to create something for themselves, because there are less people that are really putting in the hours and putting in the effort. And so, like you said, it's not 40-hour weeks, right? It's you probably, how many hours a week do you think that you put in when you first bought that distress practice, then you had to turn it around?
There was actually a running joke in the local dental community. Somebody in the dental community saw that I was at my office at like 11, 12 o'clock at night. So there was like pockets of like the Orlando dental community that they would say things like, "Oh, Dr. Kelley, I heard he sleeps at his office," which was true. There were certain nights that I would just sleep in my office. But yeah, I mean, it would vary, but a 60-hour work week was not unusual, which is a decent amount of hours.
Yeah, but that,
not really sustainable for me anymore.
Yeah, well, you did it. Well, you had to, right? I've been there too. I had my businesses. I had several fitness centers around town, and it required a lot of work. It just requires a lot of effort while you're figuring it out. It's not a machine where you do it and walk away. It's a garden that needs constant pruning and hedging and all that kind of stuff. And so, you also mentioned listening to books and listening to audiobooks and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And so, I think that's another important part is like, people who have early success in life, they're working really hard, but they're not just putting in the hours. They're also working smart too. So it's a combination of working smart and working hard. So you're putting in the hours, you're putting the effort, and you're learning because you're sharpening your mind. So like, do you have like maybe one or two of your most influential books or podcasts that you think helped you during this time?
Yeah, you got to read books, business books, personal development books. I probably resort to Extreme Ownership a lot by Jock, Willink. Principles by Dahlio. I got really into that book for a while.
I've heard about it. I haven't read it yet, so I'll need to read it.
Good to great. There's just so many good books, and they all touch on similar topics, but it's always nice to hear them from different perspectives. But reading is a must.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it takes a stroke of luck, absolutely. But also, I believe so many people are sitting on the sidelines right now or whatever, like complaining like, oh, everybody else has opportunity and has it easy and woe is me and I'll never be able to get there. It's like, well, how much time do you actually spend working? How much time do you spend on self-development? How much time do you spend watching Netflix and on Instagram, right? Like, if you really take a time measurement, a time study, I bet you'd find out that you got a lot of room, right, for improvement and a lot of room to do things.
Where do you spend your money? What do you spend your money on? Because, we're bombarded with advertisements and marketing for us to put our money in places that we probably shouldn't. Mm-hmm. But we do because it's just, we want to experience the best things in life, and we want to drive nice cars, and we want to go on vacations and all these things. But if you're really trying to step up your business and your financial situation, you kind of have to go in financial hibernation.
I agree with that. We do a whole podcast on that. But before we get too wrapped up into that, like, I want to talk about the transition from 1 to 2 locations, what that was like for you. I know you mentioned that's when you met your co-founder. Now, like, did you acquire your second location before or after you met him and you decided that you guys wanted to form like a DSO?
Yeah, so our COO now, his name's Matt Robinson.
Okay.
He started as a dental receptionist with an MBA degree.
Wow.
That just kind of shows his level of humility and what he could see as the opportunity with working together with me. And we worked together in one location for a year like that before we bought a second location. And the second location we bought was about 40 minutes away from the first location. And we actually bought 2 offices and merged them together, which wasn't necessarily the easiest thing to do as our second location, but it was a scrappy thing to do. And at that time, we didn't really have a bank that was willing to give us money beyond one location. So we were lucky enough to find 2 dental offices that were a block away from each other. And we did a seller financing deal on both practices, and we're able to to purchase both of them and merge them together under one roof, and it ultimately was a success. There was definitely some major bumps in the beginning. That first dentist I hired for that second location, I actually ended up having to terminate, and I had to go be the dentist. So that's something that's fun to talk about, especially if you're a dentist and you're a dentist entrepreneur and you're thinking about stuff like this. There definitely is like a gravitational force that draws you to these additional locations if things go wrong, and you can only be in one place at one time. So that's definitely like a real pressure that you will feel as you grow beyond one location, or even if you have one location. It's like, finding good dentists and keeping them is really what this is all about.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
One of the main things.
I can imagine, right? Like you've been trained in school clinically to work, do everything chair side, and so now you're becoming CEO, like the entrepreneur of a DSO of a group, and it's like there's that draw, like you said, like it's comfortable, right? Going back to that chair side, but you got to grow and scale and learn different things and wear different hats if you're going to keep the company on pace. Is that kind of that dichotomy that you're talking about?
Yeah, I had a unique situation where I just quit clinical dentistry at 2 locations, and oftentimes, a lot of dentists, they're not willing to do that because we make great money as clinicians. But for me, like, I made that choice, and then I got sucked back into it, like I was saying. But I knew I wanted to focus 100% of my time on the business. That was my choice. I was willing to take a tremendous pay cut to do so, which I did. But yeah, the reality is, bouncing back and forth between the clinical mindset and the business mindset. Not many dentists can do both. It's especially if you're really trying to grow. Most dentists I know that have grown into a multi-location group at least start cutting back to part-time, and it's almost like it's inevitable that they're going to fade out of the clinical role. It seems so. I just think that's kind of part of it.
And we talked a little bit. I want to highlight a point about like growing with intention, right? And I know that's been a big focus for you personally. Like, when did you start thinking about that? Like, was that during this process of like trying to step away from doing things chair side and trying to step into the role of the CEO, or what kind of sparked that?
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. Matt and I just didn't know what we were doing, and it was really scary for me because I had all chips in on this business. I put a lot of money on that second practice purchase, cash, to go along with the seller finance. And it literally every dime I had was in this business, and I felt like I was almost being reckless because I was hearing from other dentists, it's like, oh, what are you doing? You're buying multiple locations. You're not practicing anymore. So I doubted myself, like, because that's kind of like what the human brain does when we enter situations that are unknown and out of our comfort level, is like we have a tendency to doubt ourselves. And I was definitely doubting myself in the very beginning. But I think there was like a North Star that was kind of like guiding me through the process. And it was like that North Star was like, how can I do the right thing? How can I make dentistry better? Like, how can I take the best care of my people, the patients, and my team members? And I thought that was just like, I thought that was possibly going to be my demise, because in business, it's a balance. It's like you can sometimes care too much in it, and it can cost you your business. So there's a delicate balance between, caring and not caring enough, or over caring and not caring enough. But I started to realize, through my membership with the Dentist Entrepreneur Organization, that this was a thing, and this was the right answer to like build a great culture and to do things better and to challenge the status quo. And I was going to these conferences where that was the message, and I was like, holy crap, like that's that was my North Star, and it was resonating with me. And I just kind of like held on to it like a rope, through those tough times, through the dark tunnels that, every entrepreneur goes through. And ultimately it helps guide us to success and enable us to grow our organization. And when you grow your organization, you can start to hire people that are better than you at certain things. And it takes less, you start to take your hats off, because in the beginning you wear all these hats. You're trying to be the marketing person, the HR person, the financial person, the operations person, the dentist, all that stuff. And you're not really qualified to do hardly any of it. But you got to get to the next milestone to where you can afford to hire, a chief marketing officer, a CFO, a controller, and all these different types of people, regional managers. So, that was kind of like the challenge. And I was lucky, I think, to have met the right people and affiliated myself with the right group that gave me that support.
So what did that do with you personally? Like, I know you mentioned that it was kind of a struggle for you. And if we can talk more about that, like how it affected you personally and how you overcame that, I think that'd be cool. And that could probably help some people too.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, it was the scariest. I think some business coaches say making the first million is the hardest. And then, making the next million is even harder. And then after that, it gets easier. It's somewhat true. For me, like in the very beginning, I was keeping myself up at night thinking about all the terrible things that could happen. And I think that's really what prevents a lot of business owners from making calculated risk to grow their business. And not everybody's, cut out for it. I really questioned if I was cut out for it. They say things like this aren't made for the faint of heart. And I was like, what does that mean? I feel my heart like beating out of my chest. Do I have a faint heart? Is this not for me? Like maybe I'm too like neurotic or anxious to handle this level of uncertainty and risk factor with my financial situation and where I'm going with my life. I mean, because when you're starting off, there's a lot of unknowns, especially if you don't even have a business degree. I mean, I had a dental degree. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's basically a technician degree. So it was all very scary.
Has your motivation changed from when you started to now?
Has my motivation?
Yeah, like your intentionality, like your reason, your why.
Yes. So that's what we were originally talking about, weren't we? Yeah. So it's probably just because we get older and over time, we have to be motivated by different things. And I don't know, right now, my goal is really to just grow this company in the most qualitative way I can. And every decision that we make is in the best interest of, the people that are involved in the company. And we don't want to grow just to grow. We want to grow the right way.
Yeah. And I think, it's hard to not chase the money, right? Like it's, and I'm guilty of it too. Like I get a thrill out of it. And, but what happens is, when you are in the comparison game, there is no winning, you can only lose. And so it's really hard because, like we talked about earlier, we got Fomo because we're exposed to so many more things. We're exposed to everything. Everybody who's successful is thrown in front of our face. And so, it's really hard to not just compare yourself to the people who look like they're living their best lives, or even the people in your industry, like who have created really great, DSOs and other networks and organizations. And so like when we're going on that rabbit hole of when the goal is more, then you never get there, right? And you don't even know if you're making progress. I mean, you can make a little bit of progress, but really, like, I think there's a shift that happens at some point for a lot of people. Some people, it might never happen, but you shift from just the goal of being more money to a more like deeper reason, right? And so for us, like we want to get involved in like, helping kids in poverty in third world countries type of thing. And like, that was our kind of like, working in the background, but like, I don't know, what was that like for you?
I mean, the shift for me was going to therapy, because I had that mindset of more and more and more, and it was making me like utterly miserable. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. And this all occurred when I left clinical dentistry, because I think just mixed in with all the other anxieties that I was having over this unknown territory of growing a dental group. Yeah, I had to go just talk to somebody and sort out, like, why am I struggling to keep myself calm? Why am I unhappy? It's like, shouldn't I be happy right now? And that was like the changing point for me, because, you know, when you go to therapy, oftentimes it'll start with your childhood. And there's some things in my childhood that I didn't know were really affecting me as an adult. And to get educated on that, and to understand why I was acting the way I was acting, and why I was thinking that more would ultimately make me happier, was ultimately leading to my issues. So
what did you switch to? Because the goal was kind of more like more money, more success, more whatever you want to call it. And then what did you have to pivot to kind of pull yourself out of that?
I just realized I got more satisfied helping other people. Like when I helped grow an individual in our company, when I, you know, converted an associate doctor to a partner, or when one of our doctors would talk about, like, you know, how they're seeing so many new patients, and it's this like so much better than their previous job, and like these, you know, I realized that those events were making me more deeply satisfied than anything for myself. And I was like, wow, like, why don't I just chase these instead of chasing things for myself? And that's really when the grow by intention started to solidify that, you know, I'm just, you know, obviously I have to have some sort of protection over myself. I mean, otherwise I would just have no existence. But when you put everybody else's needs in front of your own, it's a beautiful thing. It's just, it just feels so much, the satisfaction is just so much deeper than what you could ever have for yourself. And, you know, I think that's what we see in the business world, when we might see an individual that is clearly just running off greed and really making decisions based on their own best interests. We can all agree that those often tend to lead to negative outcomes on their culture, negative outcomes on their business. It's just, the world is expecting things to be better and better, which is a good thing. I'm an optimist, and I think there's a lot of great leadership in this world right now, and tapping into what they are doing to grow their organizations is really where I think people are going to get the best influence.
Yeah. So what it sounds like is going from being like self-focused to being others-focused, focusing more on helping others, which ironically does help you achieve your goal of more, right? But it's through a way that doesn't hurt other people, that benefits other people, and it's a more satisfying journey too. So I think that's cool, and I talked to a lot of people and like who have gone through that sort of phase, and but I don't think it's like, I think it still is a constant kind of battle. I think you constantly have to think about your why, because it's easy to get pulled back into it, and so I don't think there's like a point of arrival. I think it's just like a constant, it's a constant path that needs work, like that needs intentionality, and so. But it's cool to hear that from your perspective. And so, you know, I know we talked a lot about mindset, but I think that's really important, right? Like it lays the foundation, like having the right mindset lays the foundation for what you want to do. But let's shift to like the tactical things, you know, that you guys did and that helped you, like starting. So obviously we like talking about the real estate, but there's a whole other myriad of factors that we want to like pull out as well. But so from the beginning, you know, what was the real estate like when you bought your first practice? Like was that even a thought? Were you thinking, did you want to go retail? Did you want to stay office and save money? Looking back, did you make any mistakes, or did you feel like you made the right decision there?
I always thought my first location was a terrible location because it had no roadside visibility. And at that time, I wasn't really internet marketing. So of course my new patient numbers were rather low, and I always would blame it on my location. I used to be envious of doctors that had retail locations. I was like, oh, they have it so much easier than I do. Well, I just learned how to do internet marketing. I mean, I didn't really learn. It's just our marketing team, was formulated, and we hit the internet marketing really hard. And I realized, wow, it's not just about physical real estate. There's digital real estate too. And that was a game changer for me. And I realized actually that location I had was a great location, even if it didn't have storefront visibility to the main road. So that was definitely an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, and it's usually, I agree with you definitely. Like, you don't have to necessarily have a great retail location, but you probably do need a good digital marketing effort in that sense. And so the best is just combining two, because a lot of people don't like to, not a lot of people, some people don't like to pay for the extra rent, and they don't like to pay for internet marketing. And so they really just want to grow 100% through referrals by doing a great service. And,
you pay for the retail.
Yeah, you do. It's
built in marketing.
Exactly. Looking at it as a factor of marketing. So I think you can grow, not doing digital marketing and not having a retail space, but you can only grow so much, right? Like, at the end of the day, you're going to get capped somewhere along the way. And so if you really want a lot of growth, stacking the deck in your favor by choosing these sites, like a good retail spot serves as marketing, right? And you can compound that with having good digital marketing. And so it sounds like you guys really tapped into and had some good digital marketing. And so do you still have that location, and is it performing well for you guys?
Yeah, it's doing great. I started getting involved in real estate in the beginning. I bought the building of my first location, and real estate was always, attractive to me. But it was, buying the practices was more attractive.
Yeah.
So, we don't own every single building that our practices are in, but if we're given the chance to buy the real estate, we do consider that heavily. I personally take a lot of advantages with the real estate these days because I do cost segregation studies. So I'm allowed to take a lot of deductions that maybe the average person can't do just due to my circumstance that I've built for myself. That's a whole podcast in itself that maybe we can do. Cost segregation studies, real estate professional election, bonus depreciations. These are things that
we can talk about it a little bit.
Cool stuff to talk about.
So essentially you have to work a certain amount of hours to claim status as a real estate professional, and then you can use cost segregation to write off your income from your dental business, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So I have a 22,000 square foot medical office building that we just did a cost segregation study on, and it created $1 million deduction that I can use on my ordinary income. So I can use that deduction for the next 4 or 5 years on that one building alone. Of course, there's caveats to it. I have to actually manage this building, which is, it's no joke to manage a building of that size. But you also have to qualify and spend this 750 hours a year, and luckily I have a CPA that works internally in our company that really helps a lot with these decisions. Being a full-time dentist, you might have some issues qualifying, just because if they do audit you, they're going to look at you and say, well, you spend 40 hours a week in the office. How are you spending 750 hours a year actively managing your real estate portfolio? But there are some cases that have ruled in favor of the dentist, even if they're full-time, to take these elections. You can also have your spouse take the real estate professional election instead of you. So there's these different ways of making this work, but I think it really works best if you're all in on real estate and you're really going to keep growing your real estate portfolio into the future. If you're buying one building here and you're not going to really buy another one for a while, I don't know if it's really worth all the effort and money, because you have to pay for these cost segregation studies to be done.
Yeah. I always, because we are full-time real estate, I always forget the actual hours that are needed to claim the status. But so 750 is a good.
Yeah, I don't think you'll have any issues qualifying.
But I think it is a great, cost segregation absolutely, can help write off a ton of taxable income. So I think it's a great strategy. And so, how did this thing start to hammer out? So you met your COO now. You guys are co-founders of this project. And then what was the what was the intention? Was there a certain amount of locations you wanted to get to? Was there a certain amount of like gross revenue you wanted to get to? Was there a certain number of like patients that you wanted to help? Like what were kind of like your goals that you were shooting for? And then how did you go about structuring, because now you got to think about financing, right? Like bank debt, private debt, private equity, bootstrapping, whatever. Just talk us through that a little bit.
I mean, we wanted to grow as much as we were allowed to grow. And we were using, a bank that was giving us money for our first couple locations. And as long as they were going to give us money, we wanted to keep buying practices. We wanted to keep buying buildings. Things started to really slow down with using a bank just because when you become leveraged to a certain size, usually over 5 million in outstanding debt, a lot more red tape starts to form around your abilities to get additional money from the bank. So you have to start thinking of other sources, whether you're going to use your own capital, your own retained earnings, or are you going to bring on an investor? Are you going to raise your own money? These are things that really are the necessity to get beyond, the milestone of 5 million in debt. I mean, if you want to have a $10 million a year revenue business in the dental field, you can get there with a senior bank, but it might take you 10 years or so. But if you're wanting to get to $100 million in revenue in 5 years, then you're going to really need to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to need a highly experienced CFO to get you there because I don't care who you are. If you're a dentist, you need people to help you get to certain milestones in this game.
It took a combination.
Getting there by yourself is.
It took a combination of you, your co-founder, and your CFO to kind of paint the picture to the bank to get you approval for enough lending to get to 5 locations. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I mean the 5 location mark, we got there pretty much with just myself and Matt, and then we hired a CFO over a year ago, and he's been working this whole past year on ways that we can basically get more money. We had multiple conversations with private equity companies, mezz debt lenders, all these types of traditional institutional investors that, we decided to pass on all of it because there was an opportunity just to create our own fund, which is a RegD 506C private placement fund, which for whatever reason, the dental field doesn't really utilize very much, but the real estate world does. Austin, about this type of fund. So it's basically you can raise up to $10 million in a 12-month period, and you can utilize that money for your growth. So we said, well, why don't we just do that? That just seems like a much better decision, especially for our company at this point. We'll probably end up doing around $20 million in revenue in 2021. So that's what we've done. And I think we're one of the only DSOs in the country that has their own private placement fund. I haven't heard of another one that's doing it. And Nathan Chitty, our CFO, is actually going to speak a little bit about it at the next CEO conference in November. So that's what we did. And it's a lot of work and it's a big investment to create this fund. We're offering 10 to 12% annual return for investors. We've already raised $1.7 million. Our goal is to raise $5 million. Probably by the next, I think 4 or 5 months, we'll hit that goal. And we can raise more money once we close that fund. Okay. So there's some other ways to get capital too that are much more complicated, but at the end of the day, if you want to grow, you have to be creative with your capital stack.
Yeah, I think it's cool, and it's a very unique way to fundraising and grow capital. That's for sure. So the high level, and just to let's break things down. There's kind of like 3 traditional ways to grow. One of them is bootstrapping, which just means like you save as much as you can until you can afford to buy it yourself. The second one is bank debt. And a lot of times those 2 things go hand in hand, right? Where you're just taking on as much bank debt as they'll give you to go out and buy practices. But banks obviously come with certain limitations and rules around it. And then you've got private equity as well, which is similar. They have the directives and they have rules around it, and you have certain. So a lot of times private equity is a little bit more aggressive because you got to hit these metrics, but they also provide you assistance. So it's a give and a take. The reason people like bank debt more so than private equity debt is because let's just say you owe, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% interest, whatever it is, it's usually cheaper than giving a piece of equity, right? Because now they're taking a piece of the upside. So that's why a lot of people like to avoid private equity. Of course, like the argument to that is, well, they're helping you massively grow, right? Would you rather give away 50% so that you can 4X versus like paying 6% interest so that you can, grow by 50% or you can 2X, right? So there is a trade-off there. But the fund idea is really interesting because you're almost combining those two. It's almost like a hybrid between the private equity and the bank debt. The interest rates, not the interest rates, but the cost of the money is higher than bank debt. But it's a relatively safe return for the investors. And then obviously it comes with its own risk, but then they're also not taking a piece of the upside. So is that kind of the thesis behind it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the fact that we turned down private equity might be a terrible quantitative decision that we've made. But at the end, we're focused on qualitative decisions. And if we grow much slower with our current setup than if we had private equity, then so be it. I've already accepted that. And we like to be in control of what we're doing, and we know if we got private equity involved, it probably would change to some degree.
Yeah, definitely.
And we like to give the benefit back to the dentist, especially the dentists in our group. Why can't they be our private equity?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think so. Moving forward, kind of like, what's your plan for the future? Like, where do you see Operation Dental going? And where do you see the dental industry going as well?
I mean, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We feel like we just got started. So I think with time, we'll definitely hit new milestones in the future. And at the end of the day, we want our staff members to be proud of working within our group. We want our doctors to be proud. We want our patients to be raving about our services to their friends and family. I mean, it's really simple. And if we can spread this culture that we have throughout the state of Florida or even beyond, so be it. Great. But if we, double in size and we kind of stay around that point for the next couple of years, that's fine too. We're just really grateful to be able to be doing what we're doing.
That's great. That's great. I mean, you guys have built a great business so far, and you're only on track to continue to grow. So it's really impressive what you've done, and I look forward to seeing you guys crush it. What's a great way for somebody if they want to get involved or learn more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I mean, check out our website, operationdental.com. We just launched a new website that's very informative. Our Chief Marketing Officer, Dave Womble, put a lot of work into making it very informative and speak to, dentists really. So, if you're a dentist and you're looking to work with a great group or help grow your practice, reach out to us. We love talking to people about the DSO space and the dental industry. It's a lot of fun for us.
Peter, looking forward to seeing you at the live event, the DEO here in Orlando in a couple weeks.
Awesome. Likewise. Thank you so much, Austin.
Thanks,
It's been a lot of fun.